Hello and welcome back to Homemaking with Joy. I'm Rachel. This is week 4 of the Pantry Challenge, the 3 Rivers Challenge. I've been participating. There are 3 videos before this if you've missed them, but I will be sharing all the dinners that I make this week for my family. All of the ingredients will come out of my pantry. I did decide I'll get milk and eggs and possibly some fresh fruit at the store for my kids, but otherwise we are just eating from what we have at our house. And I did have to go to the store last week for milk, and it felt very odd to be in the grocery store. I much prefer to be home. I have 3 kids, and it's a lot of work to go to the grocery store. So we just stay home and eat out of our pantry, and it's awesome. So it is Monday, January 22nd, and I'm thinking about dinner. It has already been a busy day in the kitchen because all of my grab and go stuff is eaten. It's gone. The last 3 weeks have kind of emptied my fridge, which is a good thing. I want to go through that food, but I need to be a little more intentional about making other things. So I have 3 loaves of sandwich bread rising, and I also made some energy bites, which are a good snack for my kids. And I refilled some of my upstairs containers with bulk goods that I keep in the basement. I have big food grade buckets in the basement of dry bulk goods, and so I had to bring up some oats today. I also had to grab my big container of peanut butter and bring that up. I had to grab my big container of honey and refill that. So it's good. Clearly I'm working through my pantry and using the ingredients that I have. I've had to thaw meat and get that ready for the week. But again, I have the food on hand. I just need to think it through, which is not a bad thing. So without further ado, tonight's dinner is bacon corn chowder. I am using this cookbook, Hope's Table. I've heard lots of good things about it, but I haven't actually cooked anything from it yet. I got this as a Christmas present. So the bacon corn chowder recipe is in here if you have this book. If not, maybe check it out. Obviously, the first step in bacon corn chowder is to cook some bacon. This is some Good Ranchers bacon that we get in our Good Ranchers box delivered on a regular basis. I'm just putting as much as I can in the pan. I think the recipe said like 6 slices of bacon, but I've never found it to be a problem to have more bacon on hand. The recipe called for half an onion to be chopped, so I did that while the bacon cooked. The bacon is done cooking, so I'm going to pull all of that out and let it drain on a paper towel, and then I will move on to the next step, putting the rest of the soup ingredients in that pot. I'm going to deglaze my pan with a little bit of water. I think the recipe called for cooking wine, but I don't have any of that on hand. So I'm going to use this water to lift all the bacon stuff off the bottom of the pot for that delicious flavor, and now I'm going to saute the onion in it. It was really, really good. We ate baked potatoes last week, but didn't quite finish them, so those are the potatoes that I pulled out of the fridge to use for this soup. So you would have to cook the potatoes longer if you used raw potatoes, but these are already cooked, so I will just saute them and brown them a bit in the pot, and then once I have the soup heated up, everything is cooked and ready to go. It was really convenient, and I'm glad I had those around. I enjoy watching these videos as I edit to see my family running around in the background. My husband was chasing the toddlers and they were squealing with delight. This is what my pot looks like. All the water has evaporated, but that delicious bacon grease is thoroughly coating all of the ingredients in the pot. I need some butter for the soup, and then it calls for 1 pint or 2 cups of corn. I will mix those ingredients into what I already have, scraping the bottom to make sure nothing sticks, and moving that butter around so it can melt in the pan, all the while having a conversation with my little man next to me as he watches me cook him some yummy dinner. The liquid component of this soup is milk, which makes it really creamy and delicious. I'm adding in some flour here so as the soup cooks on the stove, it does thicken a little bit more. I'll just whisk this into the milk, pour it all into the pot, and as it warms and cooks, that flour will help thicken things. I'm going to leave the sound on for the next clip so you can hear what my house is like while I'm making dinner and some cute little boy giggles. They certainly don't always get along that well, but when they do, it is so enjoyable to watch and listen to. Now I'm adding some salt and pepper to my soup, the Redmond real salt that I like to use, and obviously the last of my pepper. I like to buy peppercorns and grind them myself to get a fresher flavor for the pepper, but off the top of my head, I don't actually know if I have more peppercorns, so I'll have to go check on that. And here's some parsley too. At this point, I'm going to mix in these last seasonings or ingredients and let it simmer on the stove for a little while, and that's it.
These are the loaves of bread I made earlier in the day, and they will pair perfectly with our soup. A nice thick slice, toasted with butter, is the way we like to have it. I chopped up the cooked bacon to add to everyone's bowls, and it was really delicious. Thank you, Hope, for this great recipe.
Today is January 23rd. My kids are currently doing their nap time and quiet time, and I'm starting to think about dinner. I'm going to make an instant pot meal tonight called cheesy chicken and rice. So I need to get the chicken out and the cheese out of the freezer. I think the vegetables go in frozen and the rice is good. So those are the only things I kind of have to prep for dinner tonight. It's an all-in-one meal, so that should make it pretty simple. I might serve it with some canned fruit. We'll see when the time comes. But as I do that and as I decompress during this quiet time, I wanted to share a little mom thought, because I'm in the cycle of doing my best to get things done, but sometimes that's really challenging. I have 3 kids ages 4 and under, and yesterday I totally nailed it. I got so much done, and today my house is a wreck. And you might notice I'm in the same hairstyle as yesterday. Yes, I slept in it. I did put some makeup on because whenever I film, I like to have a little bit of makeup on, so that's a good motivation. And I have like maybe 8 shirts that I rotate through because I'm in that weird postpartum stage where pre-baby clothes don't fit, but maternity is no longer applicable. And so you'll see me rotating through these same shirts all the time. And that's okay because I'm mostly home and my kids don't notice, and they're comfortable and I like them. So if that's you, or if you're in a mom season right now where you don't look put together, you're not ready to put yourself on YouTube every day, totally fine. There are certainly times I creatively cut videos so that, I don't want to say the better part of me or the part I want to show off gets shown off, and the part that I don't, I get to keep to myself. So anyway, if that's you, you're not alone. Hang in there. Some days I'm feeling great, some days not so much. It's all right.
Moving on to dinner, you will see me chopping another half of an onion. I really want to learn how to grow onions in my garden this year because we go through a lot of them. When you cook from scratch, onions and garlic really do make the base of many, many meals. Like I mentioned, I'm making cheesy chicken and rice, and so here is the chicken portion of it. You chop the chicken into bite-sized pieces, and then it cooks in the rice mixture in the Instant Pot all together. So my chicken breasts were still slightly frozen, but that actually makes it easier to chop them. They don't slide around so much. So I'm going to chop 1.5 pounds of chicken into little cubes. You can make them as big or as small as you like them, but because I have toddlers eating, I'm going to make them fairly small, and they cook a little bit faster that way. Well, maybe not if they're partially frozen, but anyway, this is how big I cut the chicken, and it always works out fine for me. This recipe is one of those that I like to keep on hand for busy nights or if I need a backup meal. Because it all cooks in the Instant Pot, it does make it really simple. You saw my chopped onion and chopped chicken all ready to go in the Instant Pot. Off camera, I turned my Instant Pot to the saute setting, and I added some olive oil so that could heat up. So it's currently hot at the moment. You can see my Instant Pot reading that too. And I'm going to add these ingredients to cook a little bit in the bottom of the pan on saute mode until we actually pressure cook with all the ingredients in. I would love to tell you that I use fresh garlic in all of my recipes, but I really don't. I really like this shortcut garlic. It saves me time and dishes and mess. And if you need a shortcut like this to eat real food, I'm not terribly opposed to it. I'm currently cooking and browning the chicken until it's about 70% of the way cooked because it will finish cooking as it is on the pressure cook cycle. Again, I need some salt in there, and I would add pepper if I had any more, but I don't have any more. And mixing that around so it can cook. That's what it looks like in the pot with the chicken, onion, and garlic. The next step is to add the rice. This is not to cook the rice, but to brown it in order to give it some flavor. I also find that it helps soak up some of the chicken broth that has come out into the bottom of the pan, and that makes the next steps a little bit easier too. Just mix that up and let it cook until it's browned to your liking. The original recipe calls for the rice to be cooked in a little bit of broth and a little bit of water, but I'm not really sure why they said that. And I found out I can use a quart of broth to cook everything just fine. So that's what I do. I have lots of home canned broth in the basement: turkey broth, chicken broth, beef broth. I think I used chicken in this instance because it's a chicken dish. But I just added all 4 cups of chicken broth in there, and I'm making sure nothing is stuck to the bottom of the pan and all the rice is in the liquid so it actually cooks. It's time to add the lid and start pressure cooking. If you have a knob like mine, you want to turn that to sealing, not venting, and I will pressure cook it for 8 minutes. That'll cook the rice, finish cooking the chicken, and get everything ready for the next step. This dish would not be called cheesy chicken and rice without some cheese. So I got my food processor out to grate this block of mild cheddar cheese. I much prefer to buy blocks of cheese because they don't have any coating on them or any extra ingredients like the pre-shredded cheese does. I'm grateful that all the parts of my food processor go in the dishwasher and I don't have to grate cheese one-handed while holding a baby. As soon as the Instant Pot beeps that it is done cooking, we need to release the pressure so nothing gets overcooked. I like to put a towel on top of mine and then flick the knob so the steam is more distributed and it doesn't like roast my upper cabinets. Some people like to do this with a wooden spoon if you don't like your fingers so close to the knob, and some people actually have a button that you push to release the pressure, so it really depends on your Instant Pot, but this is the method I like to use. Add a towel, flick it with my hand, and then back away so you don't get burned by any steam. The steam has stopped pouring out and I heard the pin drop. That means there's no more pressure left in the Instant Pot and it is safe to open. It also unlocks the lid for you. Do not grab the handle as it is because you just had hot steam pouring all over it. It is still hot too. So use your towel. Always open your pot away from your face so you don't get steam in your face either. This is how the rice and chicken look together after they've cooked in there. It's a little bit wet, but because we're adding other ingredients, that's a great consistency for the rest of the dish. These are just frozen mixed vegetables that I keep in my freezer. It calls for one normal sized bag, but I had a big bag, so I just dumped until it looked correct, and that usually works for me. I'm going to mix this around. Because the vegetables went in frozen, they will need just some time to thaw, but it also cools down the dish. Knowing I have toddlers eating it, they want it cooled off. And of course the cheese. So again, you could measure the cheese, but it really doesn't matter. I just add it until it looks good and cheesy enough, and feel free to throw more on top of the bowls whenever you serve it. It always looks nice, and I've never had anyone say no to more cheese, you know? This is our finished product. It's always a hit at my house. If you'd like a more in-depth video on how to make this meal, please let me know in the comments.
It is January 24th, again during quiet time and nap time because that's when my house is quiet. All 3 kids are in their rooms and it is lovely. I have my planner here. I'm going to talk through what we're having for dinner tonight and also how the rest of the week is going to go, and you'll be able to understand a little bit of my thought process on how I plan these out, like from scratch meals, but I am limited on time just like everybody else. So today during quiet time and nap time, I'm going to make some pie crusts because tonight is going to be turkey pot pie. I have home canned turkey pot pie filling in the basement from Thanksgiving, so I'm going to pull one of those out. So if I make the crust now, it can sit in the fridge during the afternoon, and then I'll roll it out and make the pot pie tonight. I need an easy dinner tonight because we have a Walmart pickup this afternoon. Afternoon pickups generally take longer than morning pickups, so by the time the kids have their quiet time, then they have their show / playtime after that, then I load everyone in the van and actually get there, and then get home, we're going to be pressed and I'm going to need to make dinner right away. So that's what tonight I'm going to do for dinner. I also have written down that I need to make muffins. So we have a play date tomorrow morning and I said I would provide a snack. So I'm going to make some freshly milled muffins that I like to make. And so I will need to do that after dinner or something. And then I'm also going to throw together some pizza dough. I like to make a sourdough freshly milled pizza crust. So I fed my sourdough starter this morning. So that'll be bubbly by the time I want to make the pizza crust tonight. It's a no knead recipe. You kind of just mix everything up and let it sit, which is awesome. So I'll mix those things up tonight. I'll have to mill before my kids go to bed because it's a little bit loud, but I'll mix those things together. The pizza crust will sit in the fridge overnight, and then tomorrow morning I'll get it out so it can ferment during the day, and I'll make that for dinner. The last thing I'm thinking through is Friday night we are leaving to go to my in-laws for the weekend, so I don't want very many leftovers. So we don't have a lot of leftovers in the fridge right now, and between the pot pie tonight and then the pizza tomorrow night, because I'll just make one pizza. Often I make 2, so we have leftovers, but I don't want leftovers. That should be fine going into the weekend, and then when we're back on Sunday, I'll start cooking again and I'll figure out that plan at a later date. But that is kind of how I'm doing things. So right now I need to actually put the camera down and make the pie crust so I can get that done before the kids are up, and here we go. It's just always going, constantly juggling.
Pie crust is a fairly new addition to my kitchen. Pie crust has always intimidated me, and I'm not quite sure why, because I've certainly made more complicated dishes, more complicated recipes than pie crust. But I make bread. I like to knead things, so making a pie crust where you're not supposed to knead it, I'm very afraid of overworking the dough and having a tough crust. It hasn't happened so far because I am aware of that tendency, but I try every time to make sure that doesn't happen this time too. The pie crust recipe that I'm using comes from Becky at Acre Homestead. It is an all butter pie crust. I just find that to be the easiest. It's consistent, it's what I have on hand, and so I can practice this recipe well before branching out into lard or other recipes. I'm cubing my butter so that when I cut it into my dry ingredients, it makes it a lot easier. Also, because I'm fairly new to this, I have not branched out into freshly milled flour for pie crust yet, so I am just using all-purpose flour for this recipe, and that is completely fine with me. We cook from scratch, we eat good food, a little bit of white flour is not going to hurt anybody. So adding some salt and a little bit of sugar, I'm going to mix those together with my pastry blender, and then I will cut in the butter. The goal is to cut in the butter until we have pea-sized amounts of butter, I think. I think that's what most people compare it to. But I will just chop this into the dry ingredients and show you like my little pebbles that I end up with. It always works out fine for me. So again, with most things in the kitchen, if you overthink it, it's going to make it way harder. Like, it'll probably turn out okay if you just keep going. So I just keep pushing the butter through the pastry blender there, and then when it gets stuck full of butter, I will scrape it off and just keep going again. If any of you know a good way to make it not get stuck or not have to clean off the pastry blender, let me know, but I just do that every once in a while and it's fine for me. This is what my crumbles look like when I am done mixing it together and I am ready to add the wet ingredients. Add a little bit of water at a time and mix it together, because you can add more water, but you can't take water out. So I'll just mix this a little bit with a wooden spoon until I switch to my hand so I can kind of press it together. Again, I'm not kneading it, but I'm pressing the ingredients together because that will tell me how hydrated it is. It also feels different depending on how melted the butter is. So the more I work it with my hand, the more the butter melts, but that also gives me a better idea of how wet the dough is or should be. I often add too much water, but I'm working on it. My dough is to my liking, so I'm going to grab it out of the bowl here and flatten it into a disc so I can cut it in half. This recipe makes 2 pie crusts, and then I will put each half in some plastic wrap to sit in the fridge this afternoon and rest. I don't like using plastic wrap though, so if you have any suggestions on what you use besides plastic wrap to wrap your pie crusts, I would really appreciate that. I'm going to make these into little discs and then wrap them up and send them off to the fridge. We are back from our Walmart pickup, and this is what I grabbed: some apples, 3 gallons of milk, some bananas, and some eggs. We like our staples, and we definitely go through them. It is time to cook dinner. This is my home canned turkey pot pie filling. It's turkey leftovers from Thanksgiving, and then I have family members who give me the carcasses so I can make broth. So it's turkey and broth and then just frozen mixed vegetables that I put in the top. So I can just add all of this to a pot and thicken it up to make my filling. It's really convenient and really yummy. While my filling is heating up on the stove, I'm going to grab a pie crust and roll it out for the bottom of my pot pie. This proved to be much more challenging than I anticipated. I do not usually roll pie crust with a baby strapped onto my chest, but being just that much further away from the counter made this quite tricky. It was difficult. I also had to look around the baby's head while I was doing this, so I hope it looks graceful because it certainly did not feel graceful. The other quirky thing about this video is that I am not using the handles on my rolling pin because they are so squeaky. Every time I try to use them, my son in the other room, "What was that? What was that noise?" And so I just gave up on using the handles and pushed down on the roller, and that worked out fine too. So, you know, it's easy for people to put whatever videos they want on the internet, but there is so much behind each clip of this video that you don't know about. Please never compare yourself to someone on the internet, because really, we clip and we choose what we want to share online. And I'm not great at pie crust making, but here we are. It is delicious and it works out, and the only way to get better is to do it. So I'm going to keep practicing, and we ate all of it. I assure you it was delicious. I don't care what it looks like. I'll work on the aesthetics later. Right now I'm just trying to feed my family. My filling is warm, so I'm going to add some flour to thicken it up. I will cook that together until it's the correct consistency to be able to put in my pie shell. This is real life, holding a sleeping baby, cooking some food on the stove while the big boys play, and I am so grateful for this life. The filling's ready, time to roll out the top crust. I put my bottom crust in the fridge during all of this so the butter doesn't get too soft, and to protect it from this warm filling as I pour it in there. The top crust is over there ready to go, so I'm going to work as quickly as possible so I don't melt the butter in this stage, but it gets melted whenever it bakes in the oven to create that really nice flakiness. I'm putting some cold water around the rim of my pie because I've been told that it helps the top and bottom crust seal to one another. If that's not true, let me know, but it works just fine for me. I'm going to put the top crust on, again working as quickly as I can to get dinner ready for my hungry crew, but also so that the filling is not too warm inside the pie crust. I'll trim off the edges and then crimp everything together. Sometimes I like to make a nice edge with my fingers, but I really just didn't have time for that today, so I just used a fork around the outside. I'll add some vent holes here, and it's ready for the oven. Everyone was content in my house, so I decided that while the turkey pot pie was cooking, I was going to grind my wheat for tonight's muffins and pizza dough, so I could use the most of my time here in the kitchen and get it all done. So the bowl on the right, I believe, is for the muffins, and right now I'm grinding with the wheat for the pizza dough. So these will just sit on the counter through dinner and the evening, and I will get to them later when I have time to make the muffins and pizza dough. I'm so grateful for this machine, for my mock mill. It works so well and it's so easy. I'm so glad I don't have to hand crank it, or sometimes it makes me laugh to think about like the donkey and the millstone, that was basically the same process, but this happens with the push of a button. So I like this option better. If you don't know much about freshly milled flour, here's a brief history that I find completely fascinating. So before about 1910, everybody had to go to their local miller to pick up their flour weekly or however often they wanted to do their baking. Well, around 1910, these big steel mills came out and they were able to process a lot of flour at one time. But flour goes rancid pretty quickly because of the oils in it, so they found out that if they remove the bran and the germ from the flour, it makes it shelf stable and they can actually ship it further distances. However, once everyone had access to white flour and started using it, there were some diseases that popped up, and the scientists of the time were able to directly link it to the lack of nutrition in their flour. The scientists told the millers to put the bran and the germ back into the flour, but they said no because they had realized there's another market. They were selling the bran and germ as pig feed and the white flour to the people. So instead of losing that second income stream, they fortified or enriched the flour with those vitamins that corresponded to the illnesses in hopes to eradicate them. But some would argue that that still didn't even work. And freshly milled flour is just so much more nutritious than white flour, which is why I use it in my home and recommend that other people try it too. If you'd like to learn even more about freshly milled flour, I highly recommend checking out Sue Becker and Bread Beckers anywhere on the internet. They're a wealth of information. The pot pie is done in the oven and the house is smelling really good. I did put some foil around the outside so it wouldn't brown too much, but I think it turned out pretty well. It is not a beautiful dish, but it is extremely comforting and delicious. The kids are in bed. The last thing I want to do is make pizza dough and muffins, but
I committed to it. As you saw, I already milled the flour. So here we go. I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna start with the pizza dough. I milled 4 cups of hard white wheat. I'm using a recipe from Kate at Venison for Dinner. I'll link it below. But we start with the flour. We add 2 cups of water, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Oops. So like 1, 2. That looks good. Need some salt. 1½ teaspoons. There we go. Oops. And a cup of starter. And that's it. So here's my sourdough starter. It's been bubbling away today. Not huge bubbles, not great, but I don't need it for a great rise here. Let me show you. So approximately a cup. Let's see what we got here. Close enough. We have just a little bit left in the jar at the bottom, so I'll add some more flour and that'll perk right back up. Nice and elastic though. I find sourdough recipes to be quite forgiving, so measurements are always loose. Okay, it just says stir all the ingredients together, cover, and let them sit for 6 to 24 hours. So I'm just going to mix this. I don't have to knead it. I just have to mix it until it's all combined. Pretty simple. Which is why I started with this recipe instead of the muffins, because I need some momentum. Because the flour was already milled, that took me like 3 minutes to assemble. That was super simple, and I'll be very grateful tomorrow that I did it. So I'm going to grab a lid, stick this in the fridge, and then I'll pull it out of the fridge tomorrow morning so I can sit on the countertop and ferment. And now I'm going to get to the muffins. I'm going to make chocolate chip muffins for our play date tomorrow. I'm not going to talk my way through it because I have a video explaining how to make them in detail, but I'll add some fun music if you want to come along with me and watch the video. In real life, I'm going to be watching a TV show to keep me motivated to keep going and keep me awake this evening. I'm currently watching Chuck with Zachary Levi as the main character, and this is the second time I've gone through the series. It's just like easy to have on in the background sort of thing. It doesn't take a lot of brain power, and I laugh at it because it's goofy. So just for fun, tell me in the comments what show you are currently watching. I'm watching Chuck, so I'm gonna go turn that on and make some muffins and clean all my dishes. It is time to make some pizza. This is my dough that's been out fermenting, and I like using glass bowls because you can see all the bubbles growing in the bottom. So I was showing my son the sourdough bubbles and explaining to him how those work. My husband really likes a sausage on his pizza, but I don't have any more bulk, just loose ground sausage. So I decided to cut the casings off of these griller sausages, and I will cook and crumble it just like the loose sausage so my husband can have that on top of his pizza.
I'm going to oil my pan with some olive oil. I'll spread it around with my hand a little bit to coat the pan, but also to coat my fingers. As I get the dough out of the bowl, I don't want anything to stick to me. So if my fingers are oiled, the same principle applies as adding oil to the pan. I'm going to scrape everything out and then start spreading. Again, I need some oil on my fingers, and I'm going to spread it out gently. Combining sourdough and freshly milled flour can be tricky because as the sourdough, or yeast for that matter, adds bubbles to the dough, the bran that is in the freshly milled flour kind of acts like razor blades and pops those bubbles, which is why you usually end up with a denser product when you use freshly milled flour. I think it's worth it though, as long as you adjust your expectations. I put my pizza crust in the oven to bake for a couple minutes while I cook and crumble this sausage, shred the cheese, get the sauce ready and the other toppings, that sort of thing. I prefer to let my pizza crust bake a little bit before I put the toppings on because I think it keeps it firmer. I don't want the dough to be too wet from the sauce and everything sitting on top of it. This is home canned sauce that I'm very proud of, and 1 pint perfectly covers this size pizza. So I'm going to spread that out on top of my dough and start adding all the good stuff.
If you are still watching, thank you so much for joining in this installment of the Pantry Challenge. You may have noticed I didn't share anything from Friday night and all day Saturday, and that's because we were at my in-laws' house. When we go there, we sleep over and spend the weekend with them. So my very sweet mother-in-law cooked all of those meals for us, and it was nice to take a break from the cooking and also from the filming and just focus on being with family. I did do lots of dishes to make up for the fact that I didn't cook the food, but my mother-in-law is very gracious and she's very grateful that I'm happy to do the dishes. I'm happy that she wants to play with my kids and they love spending time with their grandma and grandpa. Win-win. I won't be sharing any more videos like this from the Pantry Challenge, although I think I'll still be mostly participating. I want to grab some basics from the store, like more bags of potatoes and carrots and things like that, but really we hardly made a dent in the pantry downstairs and the freezers are still full, and I am so grateful. So I'm going to keep that mindset of using food we have in the house first and then just filling in those gaps with things we don't have. I do hope to do a video next week on things I learned from this Pantry Challenge, how I'll change things going forward, and even how I will grow my garden this year, knowing what kinds of foods we like to eat and how we like them preserved. So please stay tuned for that. If you're not subscribed already, go ahead and do so you don't miss that video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.